I played 100 hours of Stalker 2. I played through all 4 endings, completed every side activity, grabbed all the arch artifacts, and stopped at every opportunity imaginable to explore the mysterious zone. While there are still 8 pesky achievements that I failed to complete, meaning I guess I can't say I 100%ed the game, I feel like I can confidently say that I seeked out every single facet of the zone and experienced every aspect it has to offer. I fully immersed myself in the world of Stalker 2, despite its best efforts to stop me at times. I wanted to uncover every secret, chase every lead, and test myself within the mind-bending realities of the zone. It was an absolute roller coaster of emotions. I felt the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. From feeling disappointed and underwhelmed by the first Stalker title in 15 years, to being awestruck by both the beauties and the horrors that lie hidden deep within this dark, desolate world. Grab your gear, Stalkers, because this is the story behind my 100-hour journey in the world of Stalker 2. Leading up to the official release, I tried my best to avoid any reviews or impressions because I wanted to generate my own thoughts and opinions without being influenced by anyone that had access to play early. But it took one quick stop to the YouTube homepage for me to see that it wasn't well received initially. And it didn't take long before Stalker 2 took the wind out of my sails and had me feeling disappointed about the direction of the game. But it's not for the reason you might think. Tons of gamers had issues with the game performance, bugs, and just overall jank. And those are certainly issues I'll touch on in a bit. But first and foremost, Stalker 2 was missing my favorite aspect of the original games: immersion. Playing through the original trilogy recently, I loved cosplaying as a lone survivor. I loved the ambience, the music, the skyboxes. I loved walking around and talking in an Eastern European accent. When I loaded up Shadow of Chernobyl, Clear Sky, or Call of Pripyat, I was teleported into this supernatural zone, with no goal other than doing everything necessary to survive another day. I didn't play as Strelok, Scar, or Dekyarev, I became them. And I just didn't feel any of that at the start of Stalker 2. From the very beginning, I felt disconnected from Skiff. He isn't a lifelong stalker with extensive knowledge of the intricacies of the zone, but seemingly an American implant living just outside the zone. He only ventures into the zone because an artifact destroyed his home and wants to find whoever caused it to hold them accountable. The other half of the intro cutscene is a British bloke that provides us a scanner to try and recharge the artifact that caused the damage. Is anyone in this game even from Ukraine? I remember the exact moment I felt like, I don't know man, this game just isn't it. It was a side activity on my way to garbage for the first time. I pull up and this guy wants me to find someone's hidden stash. But why does a man named Vitya sound like an American trying to do a shitty Irish accent? It just completely takes me out of the experience. Is this really located right by the Chernobyl nuclear power plant? Because it feels like I'm on a Hollywood set. During my initial impressions, when Stalker 2 was at its absolute best, I was playing as Skiff, an outsider with an American accent who entered the zone for the first time because his kitchen blew up. And when Stalker 2 was at its worst, I was just playing as Kevin. He's 6 foot tall and in decent shape because he works out, but he's kinda ugly and is probably gonna die alone because he spends all his time playing video games instead of going outside and talking to girls. It was such a stark contrast to everything I loved about the first 3 games. There was something charming about the accents of the voiced characters in the originals. I can't fathom why a series that does so much with world building and trying to immerse you in their world just decided that it was okay to have a sequel be a melting pot of characters. Considering the studio was based in Ukraine, it seems like it was more work to hire voice actors that don't sound Ukrainian. Thankfully, shortly after this interaction, I decided to keep English subtitles on but change the language to Ukrainian. And I genuinely enjoyed the game infinitely more from that point forward. It was legitimately night and day, and I would recommend any new player change the language from the start. I don't think Stalker 2 would have grown on me the way it did if I never decided to make that change. The biggest complaints I've seen about Stalker 2 have been about the game-breaking bugs, performance, and overall jankiness of the product. Having played the original trilogy, I was prepared for a little jank, but I also had the privilege of waiting 15 years to jump into them for the first time, so a lot of the issues were ironed out. While I do get a kick out of the memes of there being no bugs, just anomalies, everyone has their breaking point where you're just like, okay, but seriously, can you fix this? This isn't technically a bug, but this game is so dark with the default settings. Like, unplayably dark. I eventually just cranked that gamma to 100 just so I didn't need to sleep until morning every time the sun went down. The most frustrating bug that I'm still running into is when you use an item via quick use, it does the animation, but then doesn't actually use the item. This happens constantly when trying to drink energy drinks or in stressful fights where I need to heal quickly before I bleed out, and then I die because it fails. It's also annoying watching enemies spawn right in front of you, or even worse, right behind you after meticulously clearing the area to ensure your safety. I've had electric poltergeists get into safe areas where you can't use your weapon to take them out, and then the door locks behind you when you go outside, leaving the poltergeist locked inside and rendering the entire area useless. Or when you realize you're running slow so you check your inventory and someone slipped a few weapons in your pocket when you weren't looking. But I think the worst bug I ran into was leading into the first big boss fight. I died, and when loading my previous save, I couldn't run or walk at normal speed. I was literally crawling through the map, and ended up having to bunny hop my way up to the objective. Eventually it fixed itself, but after dying in the boss fight, I realized my last save was 15 minutes back and I had to do it all again. From then on out, I scum-saved my way to the boss fight until it finally fixed itself again. I was not going to make that same mistake twice. There are just general performance issues as well. I could point to poppin' and things like that, but I'm more bothered at the fact that it felt like I was playing at sub 30 FPS at times on the world's most powerful console. Playing on console was definitely not the move, as the controller feels just straight up bad. The aim sensitivity isn't fast enough to keep up with most of the mutants. The best way to deal with a bloodsucker is to back yourself into a corner and spray it down once it shows itself, and then spam heal and reload in between its attacks. But then at range, the aim acceleration is too high to accurately use scoped weapons. It is painstakingly difficult to make the minute adjustments necessary to snipe someone in the head. My PC is pretty old, so console was my only option, but there's no denying that this game is just made to be played on mouse and keyboard. GSC Game World has been hard at work dropping constant patches, and I know one is meant to improve controller support. Not sure if it's out yet or not, but controllers still felt bad the last time I played. However, the patches have improved the performance. Despite the improvements, the farther along you get into the story, the less polished Stalker 2 seems to be. It feels like the devs really tried to AAA-ify the series, for lack of a better term, and it was arguably detrimental to the end product. The original games were very simple, just walls of text that were voiced over by NPCs, and by Call of Pripyat they implemented cinematic camera angles to up the production. But Stalker 2 has some Call of Duty-ass cutscenes. I appreciate the effort to try and up the quality, and I'm sure the idea of these big cinematic cutscenes made the game more appealing for the general gaming audience. But were they necessary? This game is massive. I didn't roll credits until around the 50-hour mark, and Stalker 2 is bigger than the previous 3 games combined. It just seems that the ambition of GSC Game World, along with the literal war going on affecting their development progress, led to them biting off more than they could chew. So now that I got all my complaints out of the way, you may be shocked to learn that I grew to absolutely love Stalker 2. This is correlated with the story, and I'll cover that in a later section with spoiler warnings for anyone still working through it, but I also just grew to love exploring the zone. It was a rough start here as well, with the zone feeling a little less dangerous. For whatever reason, it seemed like nothing ever attacked you while you were out and about, making the zone feel a little empty at the beginning of my journey. It felt like enemies only popped into the world while you were on your way to a mission objective or side activity. But when free roaming, there was really nothing going on. I'm not sure if it was just the beginning sections that were bugged, or if there was a patch that fixed it during my playthrough. But this eventually changed, which made the zone feel more alive. With a more active and dangerous zone, alongside changing the language so I could actually believe that I was in Ukraine, I started to warm up to the experience. From here on out, I slowly became more and more immersed in Stalker 2. I finally got back into believing I was a stalker, taking detours on my way to the next objective to hunt down an artifact, or help a group of stalkers in need. It was finally back to being me versus a dark and dangerous world, with the only true goal being survival. And everything just started to compound on each other. The more I was immersed, the more I could appreciate how beautiful the zone looks in Unreal 5. Instead of being distracted by the things wrong with the world, I started noticing the little things that GSC Game World does well, like how characters react differently when you approach them with a weapon out versus your weapon holstered. And things like this added to my immersion, creating a flywheel effect. I know I keep harping on the immersion, but it goes so far in games as brutal as the Stalker series. As a video game mechanic, it is miserable having to crawl 2 kilometers because there's no guide nearby and you found good loot to sell, and that one sausage in your pocket is the difference between walking like a snail or a slightly faster snail. But when I'm fully invested in the world, I'm all of a sudden okay with this mechanic. Because I'm a stalker that just found some valuable items. They're heavy, and this walk back to the nearest base is going to be rough. But if I can survive the dangers that lie ahead, it's going to help significantly in my quest to survive to see another day. I was once again enjoying just going out into the zone and searching anomalies in hopes of finding the rarest artifacts. I would venture out with my best gear so I could conquer the most dangerous mutants. I could appreciate the violent looking sky that comes during an mission. And with a new will to seek things out, I was finding myself achievement hunting for the first time in years, which led me to some of the most interesting content in the game, like shooting apples off the heads of prisoners to earn their freedom. I had such a goofy moment where a stalker wanted help making friends, so I fed him jokes through his earpiece to tell other stalkers at the campfire. I got to fight through the arena and become the ultimate badass. I know the arena returned from the original games, but it's still a fun piece of side content that rewards you with a pretty badass shotgun. And maybe my favorite side content, investigating the arch anomalies to get the arch artifacts. There are 6 in total, and everyone who designed them absolutely killed it. You can really feel the heart and soul that went into making each and every one of them. Nothing will top the moment I had to parkour within a tornado to grab my final arch artifact. In a world where it seems more and more content is being made with the help of AI, there's just something special to feel the passion of a dev team being poured into their creation. If I had one complaint about the arch artifacts, is that they can kind of break the game. Traditionally in Stalker there is no progression. Your progression is you, learning how to traverse the zone, avoiding unnecessary dangers, and learning the best means for survival. But after grabbing all the arch artifacts, I kinda felt like a superhero. The only setback was that I always had the drunk effect from the weird water. But that just made Skiff more relatable. Now that's what I call immersion. On the bright side, I didn't gather them until I was in the endgame, so I only felt overpowered towards the very end of my playthrough. Other notable moments in the zone include revisiting areas from the originals. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I felt a rush of nostalgia showing back up to the Rookie Village, or the first time we talked to Sidorovich. I played these games for the first time this year. I shouldn't have nostalgia for them, but I enjoyed the experience so much that internally, I created a strong bond with so many places on the map. Except the swamp, that place still sucks. I've gotten comments of how the entire map is copy-paste from the original and how it's just lazy, but I was excited to return to places I've already been. I felt it was a reimagining of the old games, connecting all 3 games into one enormous playable space. Stumbling upon places I already felt a strong connection to and realizing where I was gave me such a dopamine hit. And then to run into characters I already knew and learning what they've been up to was such a pleasure. Maybe others didn't feel the strong connection I did, but I guess we all have different perspectives on the zone. Okay, so now I want to talk about the story, all 4 endings, and how I interpreted them. So if you want to avoid spoilers, use the chapter feature to skip past the story section. I do want to just say that I'm no Stalker lore expert. These are just how I understood the events of the game and how I interpreted the endings. I also watched this video from Gingy to help fill in the gaps for anything I either missed or didn't understand. I'll link the video in the description. As I previously mentioned, Skiff lives outside the zone, but decides to break in because an artifact took out his kitchen. It seems a little ridiculous to venture into an unknown area full of the world's deadliest mutants because you want to speak to the manager. At some point throughout the game, Skiff does mention how he lost everything, and so maybe it makes sense that he's willing to risk his life in the zone. But we're never really shown it, just told, unless I missed it somehow. And this alone made it really hard to care about what was happening in the first act of the story. It's just a constant stream of go here, talk to person, do something for them in exchange for information, repeat. This is all in hopes of finding the scanner that was stolen during the prologue of Stalker 2. During this time, we're introduced to important characters and factions. First, we meet Richter, who is a stalker that found new life in the zone and invites us to do the same over the course of the story. But in the meantime, he helps us as a rookie here, sending us to Zalicia to get more acquainted with life in the zone. In Zalicia, we meet the Ward, which is a private military branch meant to protect Circa, a group of scientists studying the zone and trying to utilize the zone and its anomalies. We end up at the Slag Heap, where we meet the Ward's leader, Colonel Alexander Korshinov, and a Circa scientist, Dr. Dallin. They are working together, and we're told they want to destroy the zone. We learn that the artifact that destroyed our home, as well as the scanner, are Circa's inventions. We show them a monolith PDA we found, and they send us to Wild Island to investigate. But on our way out, we talk to Richter, who wants us to visit Sawmill. We head to Sawmill first, where we meet Spark. This group is led by Scar, the protagonist of Stalker Clear Sky. We're told this is not the old Spark, but a new imitation of them. Spark works with scientists and fights the Ward, with the ultimate goal of finding the Shining Zone, which is some sort of utopia that I don't fully understand. They believe the zone is perfect as is and want to keep it that way. I was excited to talk to Scar and see what he was up to since the events of Clear Sky, so at least that was interesting. But I wasn't ready to join his cult just yet. On the Wild Island, we meet Noontide and their leader, Strider. The Noontide are former monolith that got their minds back once the Brain Scorcher was destroyed. Strider is out to prove that they deserve a second chance despite their former ties to the monolith, but I don't think they have any other overarching goals. We also witness Strider argue with another member of the Noontide, Faust. While Strider wants to move forward from their dark past, Faust wants to return to the comfortable past he once knew. We end up heading to the Clear Sky base, where we confront Faust for betraying the Noontide, and finally get our hands on the scanner. Okay, I think that covers all the main players in the story, other than Strelok and the Doctor, but we'll get to them. Now that we have the scanner, we plan on returning it to Circa in hopes of some sort of reward or home to replace what was taken from us. But before that, we meet with Scar and Strider, who tell us that the Ward is moving the Wish Granter from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant to Circa. The Wish Granter is the source of the non-canon endings in Shadow of Chernobyl. It is the voice the monolith hear in their head, but most importantly, it is a tool of sea consciousness, another layer of protection for the scientists that created the zone. So Scar and Strider want us to see if it's really there and stop them. Once at Circa, Dallin tells us that Circa wants to connect to the generators, which are located at the center of the zone and are connected to the noosphere. Luckily, the artifact in the scanner we recovered allows them to do it remotely, instead of making the dangerous trip to the center of the zone. The noosphere is an invisible field around Earth linked to all human consciousness. The 7 scientists known as the Sea Consciousness tried to control the noosphere in hopes of ending human suffering, but their experiments caused the explosion that created the zone. At least, that's how I understand it. Dallin thinks connecting to the noosphere will help them solve the world's problems, including an energy crisis. Herman tries to stop the experiment by creating a spatial anomaly within the lab, and we learn that Dallin's failed experiment is what led to artifacts showing up outside the zone, which is what destroyed Skiff's kitchen. We take out our anger on Dallin, and Korshinov informs us that the experiment only failed due to an attack from Scar mid-experiment, so the player gets to decide who they believe. Then we use the Wish Granter as a remote test to see if they will be able to connect to the generators. We see some throwbacks to the Wish Granter endings of Shadow of Chernobyl, and Skiff wishes for all this to end, so everyone starts attacking us to end our life. Apparently it's just an illusion, as we snap back to reality after they shut down the Wish Granter. We also meet with Agatha, who seems to be the leader of Circa. She gives us the option to kill or spare Dr. Herman, and she tells us that Strider and Noontide are here to try and stop Circa's experiment. I sided with Noontide. We try stealing the Alpha artifact, but a signal comes online and Strider freaks out. Noontide are Monolith soldiers once again. From here, we assist Dr. Ozerski with research on Faust and how he's utilizing controller abilities, as well as finding documentation on the suppressor, which will allow Skiff to suppress Faust's ability to control us. Once we have the means to fight Faust, we track him down and take him out in a boss fight. More interesting than the fight was the dialogue with Faust after the fact. Faust says he angered the Wish Granter, and so it sent Skiff to take him out. To Faust, the Wish-Granter is a god, and everything that happens is the will of the Wish-Granter. Everything Faust did was because God spoke to him, and the Wish-Granter showed Faust the true reality of the zone. And so Faust shows us how he sees the zone. He says the zone is whatever you see it as, and encourages Skiff to define what we see in it. This conversation is incredibly interesting as we move into the multiple ending paths. Using the pendant from Faust's neck, we're able to get in contact with a representative of the sea consciousness. Strelok destroyed sea consciousness at the end of Shadow of Chernobyl, but according to the representative, they continued to live on within the new sphere even though they physically died. Our next goal is to find Strelok, but he's a hard man to track down. Instead, we use a member of his old crew to track him down. We follow a breadcrumb trail to track down the Doctor, who we learn is being hunted by Strider. We try to save Strider, but the Doctor ends up killing him in order to save us. The Doctor talks about Strider as a man who had everything taken from him as a monolith soldier, and it was all due to people looking to control the zone for their own interests. He says that's why the zone is the way it is. It's a reflection of ourselves. The zone is not evil by nature, but has become so due to the way humanity has tried to utilize it. The Doctor always had hopes for a better zone, but his colleagues didn't agree. This is why he didn't go through with their plans. He was supposed to be the 8th scientist in the pod creating sea consciousness. We mentioned subtle matter to the Doctor, and he sends us out on a mission to try and confirm whether or not it can exist. This leads us to the cordon, and we get to see where it all began by talking to the man himself, Sidorovich. We go with Dark to track down what we need, and get attacked by the man we've been looking for, Strelok. Strelok mentions Dark as an agent of sea consciousness, still working off their old programming, and likely only came to kill Strelok, as the mission takes precedence over everything. He says Scar and Korshinov both want to control the zone in their own way, but Strelok believes the zone doesn't owe anyone anything, and he wants it to exist as it does without any intervention. This opinion has made him an enemy of everyone else. He also tells us that subtle matter and the representative were just illusions, and the Shining Zone is also nothing more than an illusion created by sea consciousness. But he doesn't want us to take his word for it. He wants us to see for ourselves. We go up to see a beautiful part of the zone without any mutants or radiation. But in the house is a cartridge we can remove which shows us what the house actually looks like. Strelok saw the Shining Zone after destroying sea consciousness, and he chased that high until he realized it didn't exist. That's when he decided the zone needed to be left alone to exist without any outside intervention. After this discussion with Strelok, we head to orbit a station to use the cartridge and see what the representative and the Doctor were talking about. We have a talk with Strider before Scar shows up and asks us about what we experienced. And this is where you can either agree that the conversation with Strider was real, aligning with Spark, or decide it was all an illusion as Strelok said and become Scar's enemy. I sided with Strelok on my first playthrough and had to fight my way out of orbit a station. Next, Strelok wants us to destroy the Stalker program, which was how sea consciousness controlled its agents. These agents all had Stalker tattooed on their forearm. Strelok doesn't know where to go to stop the Stalker program, but he sends us somewhere to find information on where it's located. Once there, we find the data, and Strelok shows us how the program worked, with a live feed where we get to see through the eyes of Dark. The program is in Pripyat, which requires us to speak to Colonel Dekhtyarev. But on our way out, we're ambushed by Korshinov. Here, we get to decide to align with the Ward or escape, which will alter your ending. I tried to escape because I again wanted to decide with the man who started it all, Strelok. We stop in Yanov Station to earn our way into Pripyat, and then we finally get to meet with the protagonist of Call of Pripyat. On a side note, I love the fact that GSC Game World found a way to weave the 3 previous protagonists into Stalker 2. It was such a nice little surprise that their lives are all intertwined in a subtle way. We do a few things in Pripyat, but all roads lead to the Foundation, and this is where we hit the point of no return for the story. We make it to the control room and storm it with Dekhtyarev. We see Dallin and Korshinov talking, where Dallin wants to speak to the representative so that he can interact with his father again. Dallin betrays the Ward and lets us in to kill Korshinov in a boss fight. Dallin then speaks with the representative, asking them only a question his father would know the answer to. Since we sided with Strelok, he didn't answer, meaning the representative is fake, so Dallin destroys the spinning rings out of anger. After fighting tons of Monolith, eventually we make it to the generators and meet Strelok on our final push. We end up finding Scar in the death room and have a final boss battle with him. I also forgot to mention that Strelok sends us to kill the Doctor, and I decided to do it on my first playthrough since I'm a ride or die for Strelok. And as we make it to the pods, we plug in his cartridge and he enters the pod, making him the mediator between the zone and the new sphere. The ending cutscene shows Strelok taking control of the monolith, directing them to kill anyone on sight that tries to enter or leave the zone. His end goal was always to have the zone exist as it is without any outside control. And this does accomplish that in a sense, with no new factions able to enter the zone, leaving everyone still in here to sort themselves out. But something just felt wrong to me as I stared at the credits rolling. I felt like after giving all my loyalty to my favorite protagonist, he ended up being the big bad guy. Is Strelok really letting the zone exist without intervention? Or is his authoritarian control inherently intervention in the zone? It makes me think back to what the Doctor said, how everyone wants to use the zone for their own interests. Even Strelok said that everyone wants to control the zone in their own way. And I can't help but feel like Strelok is doing exactly what he wanted to stop. A bittersweet ending to such an interesting concept. But we're about to find out that there's always a caveat, and there's no such thing as a happy ending here. As I went back to experience all the endings, my first thought was the quickest change, which just required me to spare the Doctor. This aligns me with the Doctor and against Strelok. In this ending, we return to Orbita Station and install the Doctor's cartridge before entering the pod. We get a flashback of the Doctor stopping the experiment of his colleagues, which caused the second explosion and created the zone. We see Strelok approaching the Doctor with the heart of Chernobyl after returning from the center of the zone, and more flashbacks from previous games. From here, everything is the same, however we have to kill the desolate at the generators before using the Doctor's cartridge and getting in the 8th pod. Once in the pod, we get flashbacks of our kitchen being destroyed and other cutscenes throughout the game. Then we get a voiceover from the Doctor repeating what he said before we spared him, as we see visuals of the zone expanding. Seemingly new zones are being created all around the globe. And at the very end, we see the Doctor remove his robe to reveal that he is actually Faust. I'm not really sure what to make of this. I've seen speculation that this is the canon ending, as the zone expanding unchecked could set up a sequel. But why would Faust want the zone to take over the world? He worships the Wish Granter, but not necessarily the zone in the way that Strelok or Scar does. Since Skiff was the one who entered the pod, would he be the mediator between the zone and New Sphere? Or is Faust the mediator since his cartridge was used, and Skiff's body was just an entity to allow it to happen? Since the Wish Granter was doing the bidding of Sea Consciousness, and Sea Consciousness existed within the New Sphere, maybe Faust is the mediator and now has become the god he has worshipped all this time? And allowing the zone to expand is giving him more area to rule as a god. That's the best I can come up with. Either way, another ending that doesn't make me feel particularly warm and fuzzy inside. After being mind-screwed by the Doctor, I decided to try aligning with the Ward. In this ending, instead of killing Korshinov in the control room, Richter shows up to try and stop us, as he found new life in the zone and would rather die than see us destroy it. We then kill Dallin for betraying the Ward, and Herman comes in to take his place. Herman swaps the core that carried the representative with another core hosting Agatha, which gives her control over everything Sea Consciousness has created. We have to kill the Strelok again on the way to the generators, kill Scar in the death room, and when we make it to the end, Korshinov is the mediator who gets into the pod. Agatha offers Skiff the chance to stay and look over the Ward, or to leave and live in peace in his new home. She also promises Skiff anything he could ever want. The zone has disappeared and Agatha has control over Sea Consciousness projects. But the final scene shows a screen looking through the eyes of Skiff, insinuating that he is an agent of the Ward. I'm not sure if that means we've been an agent of theirs the entire time, or if they made us an agent after the fact, but it seems they have full control of Skiff to force him to do their bidding. Before the final scene, I was thinking this was the happy ending. The zone is destroyed, but Skiff gets his new home and gets to live whatever life he chooses outside the dangers of the zone. But the final scene shows that Strelok was right. Everyone wanted to use the zone for their own interests. Whether Korshinov was in on it or not, Circa now has control of Sea Consciousness and everything they worked on, and Skiff is their agent that can be called on to do their bidding at a moment's notice. But so is life in the zone. The final ending required me to go a little further back and tell Scar that my conversation with Strider was real, and then continue on to escape when caught by the Warden. I still needed to kill Korshinov, Strelok, and Scar before making it to the pod for Scar to get in. This time, when Dallin asks the representative a question only his father would know the answer to, they answer, insinuating that the Shining Zone is real. The road to the generators was also so cool, with moments like this, where it seemed like a little wink and nod to anyone who has seen the original Stalker movie. We get a route guided by our lost friend Richter, and just an overall spiritual feeling journey. This was by far my favorite lead up to the conclusion in any of the 4 endings. In this ending, we see visions of the Shining Zone. We sit down at a campfire with our dead friends and share stories, seemingly living in an immortal utopia. World peace has been achieved and all is well, until the camera pans to reveal Skiff talking to himself around a dark and dreary campfire. The Shining was always an illusion and was never real, just as Strelok said. I feel like this is supposed to be a bad ending, but part of me feels like it could be the happy ending. Sure, the Shining was a lie, but in a sense, perception is reality. If you perceive the world around you as this perfect utopia, does it matter that none of it's real? Skiff can just live this happy life all by himself, inside his own illusions. While we all know that he's all alone in the dark, he doesn't, and that sure seems like a happier ending than any of the other options. All in all, the story started as some nonsense I didn't care about, but then grew into this incredible narrative theorizing what the zone is. In a way, Faust was right. He said the zone is what you make of it, and it kind of feels like everyone was right, but at the same time, everyone was also wrong. It was exciting to see how GSC Game World included all 3 protagonists from the series, and had their stories interweaved so subtly before bringing them all together in the grand finale. Every main character in Stalker 2 is the hero of their own story, taking the steps necessary to accomplish the goals behind their ideals of what the zone is or should be. And while it was disappointing that none of the endings really left me satisfied, for the zone, a bleak ending just feels poetic. Quick little side note, I don't have a sponsor for this video, but my brother-in-law recently wrote a children's book. So if you have any young kids, nieces, or nephews, and your family's into skiing or snowboarding like mine is, consider picking up a copy to leave under the Christmas tree. I don't have a creator code or anything, I didn't even tell him I was doing this, but I thought it would be cool for him to be surprised by a random spike in sales. So if you order with the link in the description and use the code EPIC, you can get free shipping through December 20th. I bought a copy and I don't have any kids. I can't even read, I just like looking at the pictures. Gotta support the fam. So check out the Epic Powder Day. Now back to the video. So I spent 100 hours in the world of Stalker 2. After such a disappointing start, I'm honestly baffled at how much I grew to love this experience. I genuinely feel like the theme of the game rings true. The zone is whatever you make of it. I can totally see how someone loads in, plays a couple hours, and is just like, this game sucks, and never plays it again. They may see the zone as this uninviting world with poorly defined rules that's nothing but a ball of frustration. But for me, it became this magical world full of miracles and mystery. And part of it was how much I bought into the Stalker universe. During my time with Stalker 2, I went and watched the Stalker movie for the first time, and stumbled upon this video by Ephemera. This documentary is possibly my favorite piece of Stalker content, going into the themes and connections between the movie, the book that started it all, and the Ukrainian culture surrounding the Chernobyl exclusion zone. My Oppa was actually born in Ukraine, but my family's German, so I don't really have any ties to the area. Watching this documentary and seeing how the zone is truly a source of pride for the Ukrainian people was just awe-inspiring. I can't believe how I feel such a strong connection to an area I've never visited, all due to a video game I played. And I honestly feel like if I get the opportunity, I'm gonna pay a real-life stalker to guide me through the exclusion zone. Not the tourist attraction, the real, authentic experience. Despite playing the entire game through my Game Pass subscription, I went and bought the Ultimate Edition anyway. Stalker 2 was an experience I value highly, and I felt like I needed to support the devs in hopes that this isn't the last Stalker game we get. But for now, I think this closes the book on Stalker 2 for me. I can't wait to see what comes next, and we'll definitely be jumping into the DLC and multiplayer whenever that drops. But for now, I'm going to focus on other games. Stalker 2 was a highly anticipated sequel because fans have been waiting 15 years for a new entry in the series. But did you know that I played through the original trilogy for the first time earlier this year? If you want to hear my thoughts on that experience, click the video on your screen now. Good hunting, Stalker.